the CYIS Now Twitter Spaces. My name is Andrei Cursaru, the founder and chief executive of the Center for Youth International Studies, and today I'm joined with our senior fellow, Lauryn Lee Hallet, and today we'll discuss how far will Russia go. As we've seen in the past weeks, Russian President Vladimir Putin has launched Thursday an all-out military assault in Ukraine after weeks of denying hysteria from the West about the possibility of a Russian invasion. Despite calling the attack a special military operation in the eastern Donbas region, bombing campaigns began across almost the entirety of Ukraine, including near the capital of Kiev, and Russian forces crossed borders from three sides of Ukraine, including Russian-occupied Crimea to the south and Ukraine's neighbor Belarus to the north. Putin now claims that Russia's plans did not include occupying Ukraine, while warning other countries not to interfere or face consequences greater than any Western country has faced in history. As we know, this is not the first time in recent years that Russia has invaded Ukraine, a former Soviet republic. In 2014, Russia invaded Ukraine and annexed Crimea. As we know, currently Russia has attacked multiple cities across Ukraine, launching artillery strikes on airports and military bases, killing dozens of Ukrainian soldiers in the process as well. The Russian military has confirmed recently that its ground forces has been also moved to Crimea. Ukrainian officials said that the country was battling Russians on a series of fronts. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that this is definitely a difficult situation developing in Kharkiv, which is one of Ukraine's largest cities. An advisor to Zelensky told recently that Ukraine had lost control of Chernobyl, the Chernobyl nuclear plant, the site of the world's worst nuclear disaster after a battle with Russian troops. Another important development was that some Ukrainian civilians were fleeing from Kiev, the Ukrainian capital, where essentially people were running with their luggages, taking shelter in subway stations, unsure where to go. And according to the UN, 800,000 civilians have already fled their home country. So as you can see, we are currently dealing with mass migration, and the EU is currently estimating that this number could rise to as much as 4 million. Another important development is that 57 Ukrainians were killed and 169 were wounded, according to the health minister. And of course, it is currently not clear how many soldiers have died, but it's an approximative amount of 40. So as we can see, Putin deflected global condemnation and mounting economic sanctions for the invasion and referred to Russia's nuclear arsenal. We currently are dealing with a nuclear escalatory scenario as well. And lately, Putin has issued other threats to countries, saying that those who try to interfere with this invasion would have severe consequences. So overall, the crisis in Ukraine is escalating day by day, with more threats coming from the Kremlin, with more humanitarian consequences given the refugee crisis, with a lot of gray zone threats as well, especially with the degree of disinformation that is given out of this crisis, as well as the cyber attacks. So considering all this latest news, Lauryn, how is the US and the allies, especially NATO, reacting to the situation?
So in the latest developments, Biden announced more sanctions against Russia, especially targeting this time Russian elites and their families, and for financial institutions, as well as export controls that block key material like semiconductors for Russia's defense and high-tech industries. 2 days before these new sanctions, Biden unveiled sanctions on two smaller Russian banks and a group of oligarchs, warning Putin not to attack or face these harsher punishments. So that threat obviously was ignored. On the side of the UK, on Thursday, it announced severe sanctions against more than 100 Russian individuals and entities, including freezing the assets of all major Russian banks and moving to exclude them from the UK's financial system. The European Union also hit Russia with sanctions, including freezing assets. The G7 countries released a joint statement on Thursday condemning Russia's military aggressions and announcing it will adopt severe coordinated sanctions. Several members like Japan and Canada announced their own, while other nations like South Korea, Australia, and Taiwan have joined too. The US also sanctioned 24 Belarusian officials, business people, defense agencies, and firms, state-owned companies and banks and financial institutions in response to Belarus support for and facilitation of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Treasury Department said in a statement. The US and other NATO allies have responded with economic sanctions on Russia and have moved to bolster its defenses in surrounding Eastern European countries. Biden once again, after that, announced a first round of sanctions that targeted banks and oligarchs, and then Biden authorized U.S. troops that were already stationed in Europe to deploy to Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Romania, as other NATO countries also added forces. Biden said he authorized additional U.S. forces to deploy to Germany as part of NATO's response, including some U.S.-based forces that the Department of Defense placed on standby weeks ago. Biden added that he also has spoken to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Milley about additional moves that should they become necessary, would protect NATO allies. So now that we've gone through that, maybe we can jump from facts to hypothesis. What is at stake here?
This is a very big question, Lauryn. Given our recent work on Russia-Ukraine crisis scenarios, we've definitely looked closely at this conflict. In particular, as the conflict continues to unfold, many Ukrainians will likely be forced to leave their country en masse, becoming refugees. We've seen this already, and as the European Union has estimated, there may be as much as 4 million Ukrainians leaving their countries as refugees. Russian troops are also reportedly taking full control of the area around the Chernobyl nuclear power station, including the plant itself. And this is a place which is 60 miles north of Kiev. Of course, the destroyed Chernobyl reactor is itself sealed under a giant containment shield. But I think that the reason why they wanted to take Chernobyl is very much has become a symbol. It is something that is within the Ukrainian legacy. And even more so, who knows that they may actually want to change the area to their liking as they are taking parts of Ukraine. As we have also uncovered, we also have a nuclear dimension. The nuclear dimension is now where Putin has threatened with his nuclear warheads. We will definitely need to talk about the qualitative proliferation over the quantitative proliferation of nuclear weapons. But definitely, there's a lot on stake here. It is not only Ukrainian security, but it's also the security of the entire European architecture. It is very much that the biggest stakes are the rule-based order that we currently have, and also the general respect for sovereignty in Europe that has prevented an all-out war for decades. Currently, we are in one of the worst crises since the Second World War. Now, given this, what will happen next, Lauryn, in the next period?
So according to President Biden, as he said on last Friday, NATO is convening a summit that the U.S. will attend to bring together the leaders of 30 allied nations and close partners. At the meeting, the U.S. will affirm their solidarity, and they will map out the next step to be taken to further strengthen all aspects of the NATO alliance. The Associated Press reported that the UN Security Council is expected to vote on a resolution condemning Russia for the attack and demanding immediate withdrawal of its forces, citing a senior US official. The Council will vote even though the resolution will almost certainly be vetoed by Russia, the official told the Associated Press. Biden then repeated that the U.S. forces are not and will not be engaged in a conflict with Russia and Ukraine. So he said our forces are not going to Europe to fight in Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies, and reassured those allies in the East, adding in response to a question from a reporter that if Putin goes beyond Ukraine into NATO countries, then the U.S. will be involved. Biden said the U.S. will defend every inch of NATO territory with the full force of American power. He was referencing the treaty's Article 5 commitment, which states an armed attack on one member country will be considered an attack against all of them. So what do you think is the true objective of if I have to take my personal 2 cents on this, I would find it suspicious that Russia has not unleashed stronger forces right away on Ukraine. I do think the Kremlin did not really expect Ukrainian forces and especially citizens to fight back and resist so much. But still, I feel like the relatively low degree of the attacks compared to what Russia is capable of doing might be an indication that Ukraine is not the end goal here and that Russia is keeping a lot in reserve for its next move. So what do you think on that?
This is a very interesting question, Lauryn. As you've mentioned, Ukraine may not be the only target. From what we can assess from Putin's narrative, he wants to redesign the European security architecture. He really wants to go back in time towards the 90s to really see that the collapse of the Soviet Union has never happened. He wants to get former Eastern European countries in its sphere of influence. Definitely the Baltics joining NATO and then the European Union has been a great loss for Putin as well. Time will tell. Putin is a rational actor as much as we condemn him for his irrational acts. There's a game theory strategy of really seeing exactly what is the dominant card that Putin wants to use in this degree. Maybe Ukraine is a distraction to the entire situation that he is currently planning. There are even talks that as part of the strategic partnership with China, a big focus can be actually on Taiwan. And this may be a distraction towards this entire situation, as the entire Western media is currently focusing predominantly on Ukraine. So there's a larger picture to analyze. If we give the short answer to this question, definitely is to redesign the European security infrastructure to have a Russian-led world order. Nonetheless, this is definitely something that is not implementable. However, it may be for Russia to do something in the background, in particular collaborating with China in Taiwan. This would be my 2 cents on this question. But building on this, so we've talked about the main actors involved in the conflict. We also gave a context to the conflict and an update of the situation. Now let's focus on the form that this conflict is taking. What is special or particular about the nature of this war, Lauryn? As given your background, you've very much focused on future warfare. This is not what we were used to in 2014. The scale that Ukraine is bombarded with disinformation attacks, cyber attacks, and other types of hybrid warfare techniques is definitely something that stands out for me. What are your thoughts on this, Lauryn?
You've mentioned the key aspect. Like what we've seen in the past days is the very definition of a hybrid warfare. The war has been played on many levels across many domains and technologies. And technologies are playing a huge role on both sides, whether on the Russian side or on the Ukrainian side or the Western side, if you want to call it that way. We've also seen many private companies and civil organizations take part one way or another. So first, we've seen a significant involvement of private companies like giant tech companies. For example, Google intervened and disabled Google Maps to prevent Russian forces from seeing where like Ukrainians would concentrate and prevent making them a target. Then, as mentioned earlier, satellite images were used to get information on movements in the Russian forces. So that was key to understand what was and what is happening, since the Kremlin is feeding false information on the state of their deployment. Also, Elon Musk announced that he would make Starlink telecom services available in Ukraine in order to ensure the continuation of access to internet for Ukrainians. So that counters the many efforts from Russia to cut means of communication for Ukrainians. That last point is especially crucial in this conflict because that's a conflict that does not only exist in the physical realm, but also on the digital one. So the ability of the government, and especially the president, who's been a big figure in the past days, to maintain its activities and talk to its people through videos and social media, that has been instrumental in the resilience of both the army and the people. That's mainly thanks to social media that the president could directly deny the allegations, according to which he fled the country. And actually, that attempt to make it seem like he ran away actually reinforced the positive public opinion that he gathered from the beginning of the hostilities. The fact that the president could use the internet and video platform has also been key in forcing the response of the EU and other international actors, because he could continuously appeal to European leaders and constantly be present in discussions. So having this conflict unravel in real time on social media has enabled Ukraine to touch the international community and rally the Western public opinion on its side. So in this sense, the conflict is happening simultaneously on two planes, and both have strong interactions. It's because people were appalled by what they saw on social media that most were incentivized to go protest, for example. It's because so many Ukrainians begged people to do something on social media and begged people to go protest that people were incentivized to do so. So social media were a big enabler in that sense. Like, it was really a way to reach out to the outside world and compel actions. So we can see that technologies are giving really a dual dimension to this conflict, but they also create many tools to fight in this conflict, regardless of the side. One major example is all the Russian cyber attacks against Ukrainian computers and attempts to disrupt internet access altogether that we've seen in the past days. In response, hacker communities such as Anonymous pledged to go into a cyber warfare against Russia to expose its leadership. So this actually raises a question about the actors of this conflict. It's no longer the case that war is fought by governments and official national forces. Many private actors are taking a stance in ways that were virtually unseen until now. And it's not even about like private militia taking part in hostilities on the ground, as we have seen. It's about international organizations and multinational corporations supporting the Ukrainian people, using their enormous influence, which is a bit ironic because the enormous influence and power of companies like Google or Facebook have been often criticized by governments, especially in the EU. So now we can see that they can actually use this enormous influence for the greater good. And the action they took in support of Ukraine will likely have considerable consequences and probably also be a deciding factor in whether or not Ukraine can sustain a prolonged attack. So and what is especially particular about this is that they're doing that and no one really asked them to do so. So it was really a sort of way to circumvent the paralysis in which some countries were, because they were able to take decisions faster. Obviously, when you have 27 member states having to agree on sanctions to be taken, it's going to be more lengthy than a company that's not subjected to this type of constraint. So the dynamic of war fighting are truly changing, and it's going beyond most of what we've seen in recent history.
100%, Lauryn. The dynamics are definitely changing in our current context. It goes without saying that while the Russian intelligence has assessed that the Ukrainian army has been better trained and also has more advanced weapon systems compared to 2014, what they didn't take into consideration is the level of resistance and character and motivation of the Ukrainian people to protect their country. With this in mind, the resilience has been very much marked by the role that social media has played in this emerging crisis. Based on this, what can you say regarding the relationship between social media and information, Lauryn?
So the other side of the coin, when we say that social media have allowed Ukrainians to reach out to the international community, is that it has also enabled a lot of misinformation. So since the content shared often appeals to people on an emotional level, some information were shared at an exponential rate because without having been verified. For example, many people may have heard about the ghost of Kiev, who would have put down several Russian aircraft, or yet Snake Island, where 13 Ukrainian militaries would have died after resisting bravely to a Russian warship. So these events were relayed around the globe in a matter of hours, and everyone was talking about it. The problem is that it had not been verified, and it has been alleged that these facts were actually false. But the problem is, by the time that the information were proven wrong, the stories were already ingrained in the public discourse and had already shaped public opinion. And then beyond misinformation, we have disinformation. So here we're talking about false information disseminated with a malicious intent. So the Kremlin is notoriously owning and controlling certain media. We can cite Russia Today or Reply. Through these channels, the Kremlin has for years crafted a narrative around Europe and its neighbors. At the same time, it has successfully isolated and trapped most of its citizens in echo chamber. So because of that, to a number of people, disinformation about Ukraine hosting Nazis seems absolutely plausible or is even true without question. Some people in Russia are not even aware that there's a war underway in Ukraine, or that if they are, that Russia started it. So here again, social media and the internet are finding ways to reach out to Russian people. So I've just mentioned a way in which social media can be used kind of malevolently, and then again, we flip the coin again, and social media can actually be a solution. So to counter this fact that Russian citizens are not accessing the real information, some people are using very craftily certain online applications. So for example, if you go on Google Maps, you have a place where you can click on a public place and leave a review with comments and pictures. So what some people have done is that they're using this feature to leave reviews on public places in Russia and filling the reviews with comments about what's going on. And that is done in the hope that the Russian people could hopefully escape this like box of false information and realize what's happening. And so obviously disinformation is a super broad topic, especially in the case of the Kremlin. So at CYIS right now, in the space, cyber and emerging disruptive technology, we're actually writing an article on disinformation with a section dedicated to pro-Kremlin disinformation. And so I would encourage everyone interested in that topic to check it out when it will be published soon.
Really looking forward to the upcoming journal article from your program, Lauryn. So you've touched upon the topic of information. On the two sides of the coin, information has made the Ukrainians resilient by connecting them together on this crisis. do you see other ways that the Ukrainians can benefit to become even more resilient through connecting on social media? And on the flip side of the coin, we saw Russia using disinformation, malinformation, and misinformation to deceive the Ukrainian public. As we all know, disinformation and propaganda is not new, but it is rather the escalating technology which is used, which is rather a novelty. So on this, how do you see that the Ukrainians can benefit from the social media environment more, and how do you see that that the Kremlin can misuse it in the upcoming period, Lauryn?
I feel like the Ukrainian people are already pretty much taking all the advantage that they can, and when we see the reaction of the international community and the reaction of citizens in Western country, I think they have successfully used social media. And I think this partnership between private companies doing what they can to prevent a loss of connection and to ensure that citizens will access the internet. So this partnership, I think it was really key in allowing the Ukrainian people to do what they needed to. So in that sense, I think the Ukrainian people has shown more resilience than many people elsewhere. Like I think it has inspired a lot of people, and I think it's very commendable how they have reacted, and it's very also inspiring to see how this president that a lot of people were doubting because of his professional background, to see this person like use social media to reassure people and to carry people and inspire people. I think it was also a deciding factor in the resilience of the people. And when it comes to Russia and disinformation, I think they have been unraveling their web for many years. So their disinformation campaigns and information manipulation action have been ongoing for so many years. I think there's a lot that the EU especially was trying to do. Of course, until now we were not in the situation that we are today. So until now, peaceful means of resolving this problem were the only option. We were only talking about diplomacy and trying to resolve this in a diplomatic way. I feel like now the game has totally changed, so it is to see what is going on. Like, for example, before this crisis, we weren't really doing anything when it came to censoring major disinformation outlets. Like we've mentioned Russia Today, and now actually since the beginning of the hostilities, leaders and European governments have actually started to talk about ways to censor these outlets. So it's I feel like a really huge shift of stance, and it's very telling of the situation that we have upgraded to actually censor a channel.
Definitely, information is different lens that we have to take when analyzing this conflict. And as part of Russia's hybrid warfare agenda, we have seen a strong use of the use of disinformation. However, do you see the refugee crisis as a potential tool for Russia to destabilize the European security? We've known from 2014 the Little Green Men story. Do you think that this situation can be repeated? And equally, as another hybrid warfare strategy, how successful do you think Russia will continue to be with it turning down the gas as a way to coerce with its economic leverage the European countries, which are economically dependent to a degree, energy-wise, to Russia?
I think when it comes to migration, I think it's similar to the fact that the Kremlin did not expect the kind of resilience from Ukrainian people. I doubt that Russia expected the increase in solidarity amongst Europe. We can hear so many stories of people in Poland and throughout the EU actually putting everything in place to really help people fleeing the country. So, I mean, of course, we have huge movements of people that are displaced, but I feel like for now, there's a kind of solidarity to support these people and find places for them that's like unseen once again. So I don't think that until now I don't think that any of the attacks had the expected effects on Ukraine and the EU. When it comes to cutting gas, I would say, of course, we're heavily dependent on Russian gas, and we've actually manufactured that dependency ourselves. Of course, we're always hearing about Nord Stream 2, which is like kind of gives Russia some leverage on us. I'm not sure about the legitimacy of this project, but I think so. We are dependent on this gas, but it also means that we're a huge client. So I think Russia has also a lot to lose. And when you're seeing the sanctions that were put by the EU and other allies on Russian oligarchs, I think it's probably gonna come back. It's probably gonna come back to Russia and do more harm on himself and his country than he's expecting. And one thing that was very surprising to me, but in a positive way, is that so the German people were basically asking the German government why they were not taking more sanctions, and the German government responded that if they take sanctions, it's gonna come down to affect the German people. And a lot of people actually said, so what? Like, it's a time for solidarity if we have to have some negative economic impact for a while, but it saves lives. It's actually worth it. So once again, I think it really shows that no matter what the US, no matter what Russia comes with, we are answering with solidarity and union, and once again we're showing that's where our strength is, and I think it's given us a lot of way to act and be resilient.
You've really hit the nail on the head with the topic of solidarity and unity. We've definitely shown this, and also many European countries, different countries are definitely more reliant on Russian energy than others, as we've seen with the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz by implementing the SWIFT. This is something that he was not inclined to. Nonetheless, the fact that he has stopped the certification of Nord Stream 2 has been a great milestone, which NATO allies have been looking forward to since the Brussels summit. So, as we're drawing our CYIS Now discussion on how far will Russia go, as our very last comments, we're definitely living in a very much a gray zone threat area, and as you've mentioned, the Article 5 can be triggered. But now, where are we lying regarding the threshold, both in cyberspace and space, which are now seen in the past NATO summits as domains besides land, sea, and air, as well as even escalating as much as nuclear weapons. Where do you see, Lauryn, the quantitative and qualitative proliferation of these weapons moving forward?
I think when it comes to the threshold regarding cyber and space, it's also very much gray. For example, in outer space, and when it comes to space law and using space in warfare, there's still a lot of debates, and nothing is really decided on how this general law applies in the context of cyber and space. So I think there's a lot of legal and policy work to be done on that side, and I think people have tended to think in the past that it's not a problem that's happening now, so we don't have to think about it. But I think this crisis is showing us that we definitely need to update our policies and our like international treaties. And I think I'm guessing a lot of legal proceedings will follow these events. So I think it will also be interesting to follow what courts are saying. As we mentioned, the ICJ, for example, will have hearings. So I think probably if we don't do anything soon on the legal and policy side, especially like treaties, I think then the first answers given will be in international courts and tribunals.
Definitely, we need to update our current international legal system to adapt to our ever-evolving context. Especially, we need to see how we can operationalize more the cybersecurity threats to really differentiate between a ransomware and a full-scale attack that can crumble a government and even very much the resilience of a state's infrastructure. Within space as a whole, of course, we had towards autumn of last year, Russia destroying one of its satellites and leading to domino effect. This can definitely, of course, lead towards the destruction of Ukraine's satellite system to stop its resistance through social media. Very lucky to have Elon Musk with his Starlink system. And regarding the nuclear weapons escalatory part as well, is that definitely while Russia is a large nuclear power with 5,000 plus warheads, we definitely also have to look at the qualitative side, especially with its targeting systems. So overall, the very vast picture is that the conflict is escalating, and will so for the foreseeable future. The Ukrainian population is incredibly resistant and tenacious against the situation, against Putin's hopes to actually have a blitzkrieg and embarrass the Ukrainian government, and as well as turn the Ukrainian government into a puppet regime. And the West is escalating as normal. It is implementing financial sanctions. Of course, there's an escalation also in that with the SWIFT code. Russia is possibly will implement its own SWIFT system, as China is also thinking to move away from this financial order. But overall, where is the end in sight, Lauryn, as we are wrapping up our CYIS Now discussion today?
Where is the end? I think only Putin can answer that question. I think the EU is doing whatever it can to continuously promote diplomacy and promote the end of the hostilities. And I think on that it's also very commendable that we're not letting ourselves be provoked, and that we always choose peacefulness, if we can say. So I think it's really commendable to see that we're part of we're citizens of a region that acts like this. We have our freedom of speech. We know that our leaders are doing like what they can to prevent these conflicts. But I think at some point, Putin evoked nuclear potential. So I think that has everybody worried. I know in Belgium, people are rushing to get anti-radiation pills. So I think that until now, we've managed to keep people calm and reassure people. But we I guess only time will tell if that will de-escalate or escalate even more.
Definitely. Time will tell as we're moving forward in this ongoing crisis. The West has definitely shown a strong leadership in this situation by putting the necessary sanctions in place and also not putting any boots on the ground in Ukraine. EU has definitely shown a lot of leadership in this situation by inviting Ukraine in the European Union. Will be a step forward towards this westernization and also to possibly joining NATO in the near future. With this, we've talked about a lot of topics, and it has been an absolute pleasure for us to talk to you today at this special episode on how far will Russia go at CYIS Now. This episode will be aired also on our CYIS podcast on our CYIS.org website. We look forward to having you for our next conversations in the upcoming future as we look closely and analyze how Russia will impact the international security system, but also look especially within our cross-dimensional approach within the political, military, economic, environmental, and humanitarian sphere towards our mission to have a more sustainable world for all youth. Lauryn, it was a pleasure, and we look forward to keeping in touch with everyone. All the best. Bye.
Bye.